This is the good old bad end ID for Yisang, named Efflorescent Spicebush Yisang. Very cool, and a very strong ID when used right and especially in a team where it shines the most. But this is also a bad end ID. And so is this. Now, isn't this a dilemma that needs to be discussed? So when my video about Rodeo sorta blew up for a channel this size, I was excited when I read the comments because some of you guys actually read, unlike me. Some heavily corrected me and some affirmed stuff that may or may not ruin the theory I cooked up on a random Saturday, but this comment specifically got my gears a-turning. This was a comment under a comment by a user named Zeru2150, and it says, and I quote, "Even simpler explanation, the whole bad end theory doesn't hold any water to begin with." It was a decent descriptor for Sinclair, ignoring that every other fanatic was similarly unhinged, but the theory fell apart in Canto 4 with Spicebush Yisang. You don't get to call the ID bad end when W Corp Yisang exists. In fact, in Spring Cultivation, we can see Yisang willfully gazing into the TLA mirror world during his lessons. Now at first I was like, I get it, believe it or not, but it did take like multiple attempts of me reading it and trying to understand. What got my head confused is the part of you don't get to call that ID bad end. Like, scratch everything else in that comment and focus on this part specifically. Even though I mentioned bad end in my own video multiple times, I never really dawned on the term by itself. Now, these IDs have two different names when referred to. It's either the bad end ID or the capstone ID. And the more that I thought about this, the more I realized this comment as a whole now does make sense. There are other IDs that have bad ends and some capstone IDs don't necessarily have bad ends. Or so I'm told. Anyway, we need to learn what the difference between the bad end and the capstone ID is, because no matter what angle you look at it, it seems like some points might become parallel with each other, and bad end IDs might start to look like capstone IDs. So join me, friends, in trying to find the answer to this dilemma, so that we can segregate, yes, I will use that term for comedic effect, these IDs so that we will fully know what separates a bad end from a capstone ID. First, what is the difference between the two? Terminology-wise, what is a bad end ID? Now, it sounds very self-explanatory, but this is the world of Project Moon, so bad end must really be terrible. So, a bad end ID is an identity of a sinner or a mirror world counterpart where a character has fallen physically, morally, mentally, or emotionally, and they become something they normally wouldn't want to become, and their future is objectively worse than their quote-unquote normal life. Or, as much of a normal life as someone in the city could get. But now, what does capstone mean? It actually has a few meanings. Unrelated ones, like the topmost of a stone thing made with the power of ingenuity and engineering, and the other is the final school project, and I know how much of a pain that is. Anyway, these words have a similarity of sorts, and that part relates to how a capstone ID works in Nimbus Company or in the world of Project Moon. The word capstone in this context means the culmination of a person's life within the mirror world. It's not about strength or how powerful they are, but about the endpoint of a particular ID. Now, if most IDs live long enough, can they be referred to as a capstone ID? In a sense? Yeah. From what I understand, the reason why we have only gotten capstone IDs with bad ends is because we are still in the Inferno part of Divina Commedia. So it would be wrong to call one ID a capstone ID and the other a bad end ID, because what we refer to as the currently available capstone IDs should be referred to as their Inferno capstone IDs. These are the sinners with their life culminated from wrong choices. Their themes consumed them, and almost everyone, and especially themselves, suffered. But personally, I think what separates our Inferno capstone IDs from a conventional bad end ID is their origins and how they connect to the story of the sinners. In the intro, the first thing I used as a reference as a bad end ID is Spicebush Yisang and W Corp Yisang. Though they are progressing in life somewhat similarly, when it comes to their flaws as a character and their themes, which is nostalgia, Spicebush Yisang embraces his nostalgia, and W Corp Yisang is trapped with his nostalgia, his dream being suffocated by W Corp, trapping him inside the trains forever with a line, and I quote, "Is this iron force the same as the train that I hate?" He isn't talking about transportation, but instead comparing the dream he once chased to the nightmare he is living, which is, to a certain point, is nostalgia. But what truly separates both of them is their connection to Yi-sang's story. And I'm not just talking about the book where Yi-sang is based on, but literally how Yi-sang's story is supposed to go. Remember, the mirror world ID is one of the infinite counterparts of a character, but that doesn't mean that each one of them is fated to connect back to their origins. You see, Yi-sang is not just a character from the book he is based on, which is the novel titled The Wing. Yi-sang is actually a real person. He was a Korean poet, novelist, and an architect who lived through the Japanese occupation. He was extremely creative and intelligent, trained in engineering and architecture, frustrated by society due to their inability to see his potential, isolated and alienated from others, obsessed with ideas, possibilities, and things that could have been. But sadly, he died in a young age from a chronic illness that he sadly contracted in a time where treatment of it wasn't common or easy to come by yet. He died from tuberculosis. He was someone who could have changed society, even if it was just a tiny bit. And no one saw his potential. Only after his passing did people realize that they lost someone who could have done something for the people who treated him like a nobody. When we first met Yi-sang, he was basically emotionally not present, speaks detached and astray, rarely expresses his desires. In the novel The Wing, the protagonist was exactly like this. He was passive, dependent on others, trapped in a stagnant life, unable to act despite the situation, and constantly thinks instead of doing, until they let their wings, though broken it may be, fly. Or as the famous line in the end of the novel says it, let's fly once more. That is when Yi-sang decided to live for himself, and his broken wings soaring through life gave him freedom, self-actualization, and escaping that stagnation. The nostalgia that got Yi-sang in this situation in the first place was due to what happened when reality crushes dreams. Yi-sang in real life had his own League of Nine. It was a community of writers and intellectuals, but Project Moon transformed them into a group of brilliant inventors and dreamers who trying to change the world. This is what separates Yi-sang from the protagonist of the novel. Yi-sang was a visionary, and not someone who was merely trapped in circumstances. And Dongbek and Dongrang are based on real people connected to Yi-sang's life and literary world. And Project Moon uses them to explore the recurring question of what happens to dreams when reality crushes them. And each member of the League of Nine answered differently. Dongrang abandoned his ideals, Dongbek clings to the past, and Yi-sang remains frozen in between them. That's why Canto 4 focuses on mirrors, possibilities, and unrealized futures. And in the end, after losing his peers, he finally chooses action over stagnation and metaphorically, but also literally and beautifully spreads his broken wings. Okay, I just realized I ranted too much on Yi-sang's origin, but that's the point. That is what separates these ideas from the conventional bad end IDs. Spice Bush Yi-sang is a mirror world counterpart of a what if he did embrace his nostalgia, connecting back to his origins of Dongbek, essentially asking, instead of Dongbek cling to the past, what if it was Yi-sang? And that's when we can call Spice Bush Yi-sang as the true Inferno Capstone ID. And that is what separates this Yi-sang from other quote-unquote bad-end IDs. Even if they culminated their life to a certain path that follows their flaw in a way, so long as that ID does not connect back to their origins, it won't count as their Inferno Capstone ID and will stay as bad-end IDs. And to try and answer this comment a bit more, yes, this again, I want to try and give my opinion as to why Sinclair is the only sinner who, instead of replacing one of the main enemies in their respective console, they instead became the boss and leader of N-Corp alongside Cromer. Now, if we use Akram's Razor here and just say that, oh, because the game just started here, maybe Kim Ji-hoon didn't think it through properly. But this is boring, and honestly, I doubt our glorious king has ever not thought things through properly. From my personal opinion, I don't think that just because Sinclair's way of getting a bad end ID stops as soon as Canto 4 arrives with Spice Bush Yi-sang makes my theory about Rodion's bad end fall apart. Even though the trend of how the other sinners got their capstone IDs is consistent up to this point in time, I don't think that it invalidates the theory altogether. Now personally, I think the reason why Sinclair is the outlier here is because his choices in his origins would lead him to become the partner in crime with Cromer. Now, if we look at the other sinners' capstone IDs, what got them to their own capstone IDs is their choices, but none of their choices would lead them to become an original character to their stories like Sinclair. Spicebush Shisang is what happens if he embraced the nostalgia instead of Dongbek. Captain Ishmael's choices led her to become the captain of the Bikud instead of Ahab, who possibly might have not succumbed to her obsession over hunting down whales in this world, while Hunt Heathcliff's obsession turned him into the Earl King. It's not replacing the Earl King, but instead followed the path of what Heathcliff could have become. Dawn became the manager of La Manche Land not because she was already Sancho, but because her choice to join the revolution against their father led her to stray from the coexistence they once wanted, but to instead feed themselves and their children. Hong Lu, after seeing the massacre of the Kong family, left and got his homophobic eye removed as a sign of separating himself from his fate to become his family's precious jewel. And Ryoshu probably never met Araya, or Araya never even existed. So Ryoshu chose to stay in the House of Spiders and became their blade. And Sinclair separates from this trend because his choice of following Cromer and leaving his innocence got him to become the one who shall grip. So just to refresh your brains, or to tell you if you didn't know, our journey in Olympus Company references the poem made by the Italian poet Dante Alighieri, with the title of Divina Commedia. Now, during their time, this poem was supposed to illustrate how recognizing sin, repenting, and receiving divine love can guide anyone from the state of depression, misery, or the state of spiritual darkness into the life of truth and enlightenment. For a Christian, that is. Now, in the poem, there are 7 circles in hell, which are the sins: lust, gluttony, pride, sloth, wrath, envy, and gloom. Just kidding. You can erase your comments now. There are 9 circles of hell, which are the sins: limbo, lust, gluttony, greed, wrath, heresy, violence, fraud, and treachery or betrayal. The 7 I mentioned was the material system of the game, if you have not been paying attention, like me, for a while. Even though some of them weren't name-called in the original 9 in the poem, the others, like envy and gloom, can be found in the other 9 circles of hell, though they aren't that prominent, hence why they didn't get a personalized circle. We play as Dante, the clockhead, playing the role of the salvation-seeking pilgrim, though we can't remember Jack. And that is why we have our guide Virgilius, the colored fixer aptly named the Red Gaze, playing the role of Dante's guide and wise mentor. And it is our job to be the manager who manages the sinners through figurative and low-key literal hell, even if Virgil does his meme or whatever. Dante, manage your sinners, Dante. We are still experiencing the hell part in our journey, and we will be able to move on from this place of suffering to the next level in Divina Commedia, Purgatorio. And we will be able to see a new set of Capstone IDs. And these sets of Capstone IDs will show the growth of these characters. It will show the culmination of life that wasn't led by the awful choices they had in their previous Capstone IDs. But these Capstone IDs will highlight the difficult process of rehabilitation, where they show a side of the sinners that grew away from their awful mistakes that the other IDs, and especially their Inferno Capstone IDs, made. And eventually the journey will move on to the end, the Paradiso IDs, which I suspect won't be mere world identities, but instead the base IDs becoming more than what they seem to be, or what they once was. Now, that does sound poetic and all, but this video is like 6 to 7 minutes long, probably not because I added to the script by a lot, so I'm not really sure. I don't know how to measure these. I'm like on page 4, so probably even less. But since I actually want to entertain y'all, I had an idea. Even though it may seem like torture to me, but I hope future me would not be that mad at me for doing this. Anyway, in the next video, or at least in the next Olympus Company video, I think, I will personally judge whether an ID counts as a bad end ID. Because I already explained that a bad end ID isn't just a sinner's main console revolt-based ID, it's a broad term that can include other identities also. And I won't just call an ID a bad end or not, I will try and explain why an ID counts as a bad end. There's also the neutral rank. Since this is the world of Project Moon, I doubt anyone actually has a good life or a good ending. I guess except if you're rich, like very rich, then you're probably fine, but I'm pretty sure most IDs are either broke or don't need to worry about money too much. Anyway, I will include every ID, and there will be extra special tiers. So everyone wait up and listen to this VTuber try and rank every ID if they count as a bad end ID or not. And I will be using tier list maker because that makes everything a lot easier. I will talk about each sinners one by one. Their orders will be based on whose kanto got released first, and the order of the release of the IDs won't matter since I will do the 2-star IDs first and then their 3-star. And I will do their Inferno Capstone IDs last. Another reason why I'm doing this is for science and for understanding how to differentiate a bad end ID and a Capstone ID. We need to set a standard, am I right? Please subscribe to this channel, like and ring the bell because I will try and make 3 videos about these. Since there are 12 sinners, I will do 4 sinners each video. As I already explained, their order will be based on their kanzo or their introduction order. I hope you enjoyed this video and come and join me in the journey of gathering sufficient data in setting a standard on what counts as a bad end ID. Or if we can't find a standard, let's just enjoy me suffering and reading each character story and try and understand them as much as I can. Anyway, thanks, and goodbye baked goods, stay fresh.
Dante, manage your sinners, Dante.
That's
Dante, manage your sinners, Dante. Dante,
man, I need to like chain smoke to do this.
Dante, Walter.